Okay, so when we start naming polynomials, they are named with two names. They are named according to their degree and how many terms there are. So first let's talk about degree. So the degree is the biggest exponent. Remember that from the example. So we're just going to write degree is largest exponent. Okay, so that's how we know the degree. So I can have many different degrees. If I have a degree of 0, that's called a constant. Like I said before, that's the very last term you write in standard form is your constant because it has degree 0. If I have a degree of 1, that is a linear polynomial. Okay. If I have a degree of 2, this is something we just learned about in our last unit. If I have a degree of 2, if I have something like x squared, that tells me it's a quadratic. If I have a degree of 3, that's called a cubic. If I have a degree of 4, that is a quartic. Degree of 5 is a quintic. And if I have a degree of 6 or more, we just start getting lazy. We call it the 6th degree, 7th degree, whatever. So we're going to go 6th degree, etc. Okay. So that is how you name polynomials according to their degree. We're going to do some examples now. Here's an example of a constant, 3. No variable, no exponent, nothing. That's a constant. All right, here's an example of a linear one, 2x plus 1. Remember, if there's no exponent next to the variable, you put a 1 there. That tells you it's a linear. Okay. Here's an example of a quadratic, x squared minus 4x. Okay. Now remember, the degree is just the biggest one you find. It's not that you don't add them together or anything. You don't look at the smallest one, you look at the biggest one. So this one has a 2, so that tells me it's a quadratic. Cubic is y cubed plus y squared minus 4. Another example. Here's an example of a quartic, x to the 4th minus 3. Here's a quintic, y to the 5th plus y squared. And then an example of a 6th degree would be just z to the 6th. Okay. These can look different. You can have different variables, you can have multiple terms, it doesn't really matter. These are just examples of what each degree looks like. Okay, let's move on to naming polynomials according to their number of terms. So terms are always separated by addition or subtraction. So terms are always separated by addition or subtraction. Okay. So when I name these, I can have 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, and then we get lazy once we get past 4 terms. Okay. So if I have 1 term, that is called a monomial. Monomial. Mono means 1. Okay. Here's an example of that. I'm actually going to skip ahead. So here's an example of a monomial, 3x. There's only one thing there, so that's a monomial. And in fact, this is a linear monomial because this x has no exponent. Okay. 2 terms we call a binomial. We dealt a little bit with those in Unit 1. Here's an example of a binomial, 2y minus 4. What kind of binomial would this be if we were to classify it by the degree? If you said a linear binomial, you'd be correct. All right. 3 terms, we call it a trinomial. Tri means 3. And here's an example of a trinomial. X squared plus 3x plus 9. What kind of trinomial is that? If you said a quadratic trinomial, you would be correct. All right. Once we get past 4 terms, we say polynomial, and we classify it extra by saying with however many terms it has. So if this has 4 terms, we would say polynomial with 4 terms. If it had 5 terms, we would say polynomial with 5 terms. So here's an example of a polynomial. Y cubed minus y squared plus 2y minus 5. What kind of polynomial would this be? If you said a cubic polynomial with 4 terms, you would be correct. All right, let's do some examples down below. So let's name the following polynomials. So this is not in standard form. We can rewrite it in standard form. We can write 3n cubed minus 7. Well, the degree, you always want to name the degree first. The degree comes first and then the number of terms second. So if my degree is 3, that tells me it's a cubic, and it has 2 terms because they're separated by a minus sign, cubic binomial. And that is the first one. This one here, there's no exponent or variable or anything, so that is a constant. And there's only one of them, so it is a constant monomial. Okay. And then this last one, this one is in standard form. The largest degree is a 4, so we call it a quartic. And there are 3 terms, so quartic trinomial. And that's it. That's how you name polynomials.